I'd like to come to the stage the director of the film, Jon Small, producer John Jackson, and producer Steve Cohen. So in the film, you make it sound easy, but how hard was to get this thing going at Yankee Stadium?
Well, for me, it was actually very difficult. As Steve said before, nobody ever shot there before. So when you go into a venue that nobody has ever worked in the film business, it becomes difficult because nobody is expecting what you need to do, meaning I'm bringing tens of thousands of pounds onto the field, cranes and dollies and different equipment, and it could tear up their lawn. So it's just, everybody's against you, basically. That's how it works. You know, so you try to bribe as many people as you can to make it work, but nobody accepts it. You know, and that's it. But before we go on, I just wanted to thank my Nashville post-production people. That's the editors, Adam Little, Kenny Brickstein, and our audio guys, Tom Davis, Jake Davis, and Brian Ruggles for making a great sounding thing. And of course, I have to thank Billy for being in the prime of his life and singing like the best he ever sang. It was amazing. To me, watching this 33 years later, it still makes the hairs on my neck stand up. It was great.
You have worked both with Billy Joel for a long time. How would you describe this particular moment in his career? What he meant to this, with this concert?
Well, I've been with Billy for 56 years. I can't say with Billy, but we've been friends for 56 years. If you don't know, I was one of Billy's original drummers. That's right, the Hassles. And we had a bond forever. And when this came up, when I found out that Billy was thinking about doing Yankee Stadium, I tried really hard to get in there to convince this. And Brian and Steve are the two guys that could have shut this down in a second because they have Billy's ear. And at that time, Billy was going through some strange times, but I just hocked away that you have to document what you're doing. And where would we be without all those great Elvis Presley, old Milton Berle shows, Ed Sullivan, you know, all those old Frank Sinatra stuff. And it finally, I guess, hit home, and Billy said, okay, we can do it. So that was great.
Well, one of the things that I said earlier, and the important point about all of this is that I've been with Billy 48 years. Brian's been with him 50 some odd years. We've done most every live show, and we're kind of an army. We go in there and show up and do our gig and try and protect the integrity of the band and the sound and the way it looks. And Billy's always trusted us with that. So to come in and film it, one of the things that Billy always asked us to do is that we don't fuck with the show, that we just capture the show as it is, because that's what he wants us to do. Well, in filming, you can't do it exactly the same. You have to change the lighting, you have to change the audio, you have to change the staging. But Brian and I, for years, have been trying to sail high to the wind, that we get close enough to exactly what we do and then change it just enough so that John has a movie to shoot. And here, one of the things about this, when you talk about at this particular time, we had Yankee Stadium for, I think, 4 days. And right in the middle of our setup, Nelson Mandela was released from Robbins Island. And Nelson Mandela was coming to New York and was going to do a rally at Shea Stadium. Well, they were playing at Shea Stadium, so they came to Yankee and they asked Billy if they could use our production. So we're in the middle of setting up a major concert at Yankee Stadium with a film crew to try and capture this the first time there, and all of a sudden we have to give up our stage and all of our crew for an entire 24, 30 hours for this rally for Nelson Mandela, because we couldn't say no to him. So what ended up happening is that we ended up working overnight. Lighting-wise, we never saw anything because we didn't get a chance to rehearse. So what this was a bunch of people on the best of their game, without any rehearsals. And the lucky thing about this for us was, you asked about where Billy was at this time. For me, I think we had come off of, you know, a particular band and a particular run of very successful albums. Billy had had the biggest years of his career, and went in with a brand new producer, this guy Mick Jones, who produced the album Stormfront. And on Stormfront, he brought in some new musicians, and that infused a whole new life into the way it sounded, into the way we had to produce the look, the way Brian had to make it sound. And as I was reminded again in the film, you know, I think that, you know, Billy was at the top of his game here. There was nothing he couldn't do. And physically and vocally and musically, we had a really tight unit. And one of the exciting things for me about this is that now you guys get to see it, because most of the time it's, you know, it's a relic of history. So I think it was a real special time for all of us.
Before I open it to the audience, how different is what we saw tonight from the Disney special? This was, you know, originally aired as a Disney special. It was the height of MTV, and so how do you describe the differences beside the technical, you know, enhancement?
I mean, the whole point of going back and doing this with these guys was to make a different show. You know, the original show was, you know, is one of the classic home video concerts that you could get for many, many, many years. And I know I wore my copy out on VHS tape as a young musician person trying to get into the music business. And this was like, you know, it was like Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock and Billy Joel at Yankee Stadium, and, you know. And then, so when we went back and discovered that there was, you know, all the film and all the multi-tracks, and we just started going, wow, we could kind of redo this. And then it was the idea was, well, let's make it a different thing with 30 some years in retrospect, and make it different than the show. And then, you know.
Well, and one of the things that, you know, the advantage now is 33 years later, we had the ability to take the 16 millimeter film and scan it into 4K, so it's the highest resolution. So all the information that's on the film was able to be translated that you probably couldn't have ever seen even if you projected this thing. And then Brian Ruggles was able to go in with the new Dolby Atmos system. He remixed the album and all of the tracks for a record release, for a vinyl release, which you'll be able to get, but utilizing all the new technology in the studio that's 30 years plus. So for me, what it was able to do is this whole thing was able to breathe, and we were able to feel like we were actually present hearing this stuff. There was space between the instruments. There's, you know, the editor, Adam Little, who gets super props. Adam Little was unbelievable on this. He basically took these shots and let the shots play out until they were not good shots. Most of the time an editor goes in to try and cut, you know, particular accents at particular times. Here he let each one of these shots play out until they were unusable again, and unusable at the either end of the shot, which, you know, technically is kind of hard to wrap your head around, but musically what ends up happening is you get to be present on stage and see the musicians actually playing, as opposed to, you know, being pointed to see things for rhythmic or any of that kind of cuts. But the one thing I wanted to say, John, and I'll let you jump in, is and this is for film buffs here, it was the MTV era, and special effects were in the camera were all, you know, the hot thing. And if you look back at all the videos at that time, they all had a particular look. So this was 16 millimeter film, and there are 10 minutes of film in each camera. And what John did is he came up with this complicated grid to tell the camera operators that when they changed the film, they would change the frame rates in the camera. So basically half of the film is in slow motion. And so when we started the edit, we were like, well, what are we going to do with all this slow motion stuff, special effects stuff? And our editor was able to, because of technology, come up with a way to paint in frames in between frames. So all of those shots that were shaky, with the exception of the drum stuff, which we couldn't do, were all smoothed out through technology, which is why it looks completely different than that's why it's a brand new film for everybody. So it's a little technical stuff, but I thought you'd be interested in it. So.
So as Steve was saying, when I shot it in '90, I was up against everybody that was on MTV. And at that time, Billy wasn't a favorite on MTV. And it was tough to get him on. So you had to do something a little more experimental for Billy to make it work. And I did, and that's why it worked. And we sold over 1 million copies of this thing. It did great on the Disney Channel. And for the last 10 years, I've been hawking them again to try to redo it. And with John and Steve's help, I got the chance to go in and redo it. And these guys were great. They just, you know what makes it great? They have the passion, the love of the artist to put every bit of their own energy into it, no matter what. Even down to getting the tickets and seats saved for the people that need to save the seats for. I mean, these two guys are lifesavers, you know?
Raise your hand if you have questions, and we'll bring the mic. There is one right there.
Well, thank you very much for bringing this. Is it on? No? Yeah. For bringing this to the theater here.
Talk like this.
I gotta talk like this. Does that make it sound like I'm not a musician here? I was at the Saturday concert, so it was amazing. So I felt like I was here, and I hope every theater around the world feels the same that I felt. So now that you talked about the technology of the film, I have a question for you guys as a really big Billy Joel fan. Since technology is advancing, I want to know what you think about bringing Live from Long Island back. That's a huge holy grail as a Billy Joel fan.
Well,
like, that's
that was
gonna be
one of- that was one of my
quintessential,
first-
like holy grail to bring back to the film right now.
That was one of my first jobs I did for Billy. And John just mentioned to me that they are definitely seriously talking about redoing Live from Long Island, which would be fabulous, which would be great.
Yeah, that's the next one up.
Yes.
Oh, there is
Write your congressman.
Right, Sony.
I was going to say, don't tweet that.
Right. Congresswoman, yeah.
Wonderful film, gentlemen. Wonderful film. Sense memory probably brings me back to something. I just turned 10 years old a week before you made this concert. So I wasn't at the show. And I'm a Mets fan, so my father would not bring me to the house that week. That said, it was my first summer not on the East End. After 10 summers in the waves in Amagansett, my parents and my mom right here sent me to Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. 10 years old with no siblings. You want to take things that make you feel like you're at home. I had my Mets hat in one hand and my Stormfront cassette in the other.
Amazing.
Now, kids would trade everything at camp. You would quid pro quo for whatever you can. Maybe a penthouse, maybe some candy, who knows? Nobody touched my Stormfront cassette that summer.
You still have it?
Probably in my grandmother's attic in Amagansett, as long as we still
Valuable.
got the house. That said, it was that one kid that put his hand on that Stormfront, he caught a fat lip, and that tape made it home that summer. Thank you, Mr. Joel, and I wouldn't have thought of any of that in my brain tonight, back 30-something summers, if it wasn't for this film. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Bravo.
There's a question here.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank you for recreating this experience I had 32 years ago. And I noticed it was said was this all the 23rd of June, not the 22nd? None of the footage was from that?
No, there was footage from both
The
nights.
title said the 23rd, so I didn't
Yeah,
know.
but
if it included-
we shot, John shot both nights. We didn't shoot the concert throughout, but there was, on that first night, we had cameras in shooting audience and some coverage. And if you really pay attention and see Uptown Girl again, you'll see that it's cobbled together from the first night of audience shots. So we didn't know we had it, so.
So my follow-up question is, so you've done all these big events, and I remember hearing on Mike Grosvenor's Glass Houses podcast, you're talking about, the stadium was your first big event, because you've done all the little arenas, and now you did the big stadiums, and then you did giant stadium, and now you have all these different big events that you come across. What's the next big thing? Do you think there's a possibility we either have a Subway Series, Mets Yankees, with the
I was
new
thinking the moon.
stadiums, or B, Central Park? I would love both of those.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, but I think we're just. Wait, I think someone's going to answer you.
So when can we get something to eat?
You can't go to Arthur Avenue, it's too far.
Oh, there is a question here. Yeah.
Just wanted to say, when you were talking about why this film was so meaningful to redo it, I think the other thing is that, 33 years later, so many of us were alive, we were young. I mean, Billy says in the film, music keeps you young. Well, music, listening to it also keeps you young. So you took me back to 1990. It was before 9/11. It was before all the shit hit the fan. I just can't thank you enough for bringing me back. Music keeps
Thank
you
you.
young. No doubt about it. Thank you.
We're gonna. How did you choose the songs to film? Because you didn't film all songs, right?
Well, if I remember correctly, it was a budgetary thing about, when you shoot in video, you can shoot the whole thing. When you're shooting in film, it's very expensive, and there was a fixed budget going in. And I think, if I remember, Bill is hands-on on song selections, and we had a new album. He had a new album to promote, so it's a little bit Stormfront heavy because that was what we were doing at the time. Then that's sort of, and then you had to do a couple of the standard hits like Piano Man and Italian Restaurant, but. I think it was a collaboration between John and Billy and Brian and myself.
And the network only was going to air in 90 minutes. So why shoot an extra hour if it's not going to air anywhere? No, we didn't have the money actually to move ahead and document
But it's pretty
everything.
great that you shot in 16 because the video technology was already available. Wasn't great, but the fact that you stuck with the film is really great, and it makes this possible because video would have not been this good. Yeah. Last one. Then we have to go and eat.
We got to eat.
Hi, great job. Love the film. Had The Stranger playing to me in my crib, literally. If you could go back and do one thing differently from the show, like change one thing that you think would make the film like even better than it was, what would you do?
I wouldn't have worn those shorts I was wearing.
And on that note,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, John. Thank you, Billy Joel.